Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Ryzen 7000 series is here, the fourth generation of Zen CPUs from AMD that brings with it not just faster performance, but many new technologies across your PC. Today, we're going to review the Ryzen 7 7700X, the mid-range $400 CPU from the new Zen 4 lineup. This CPU features 8 cores and 16 threads, a 5.5 GHz out-of-the-box all-core boost, and incredible performance. Gaming and non-gaming benchmarks are included, as well as an overview of the new AM5 platform. Today's video is brought to you by Ewin Racing, the best source for gaming chairs and desks for those long gaming sessions. We have a playlist of our Ewin chair and desk videos linked in the video description below. Save 30% off of everything using the discount code TechDeals. More details at the end of the video. In 2017, AMD launched Ryzen and changed the PC landscape completely. In 2016, I made a video comparing the i5 6600K, the i7 6700K, and the i7 6800K, and I noted that AMD wasn't even part of the conversation. Since then, Ryzen launched, and AMD has not just been part of the conversation, it has been leading it with the first 7nm desktop CPU, the first to PCI Express Gen 4, the first to 8 cores on the consumer desktop, the first to 16 cores on the consumer desktop, and so much more. Codenamed Zen 4, the Ryzen 7000 series is the first x86 5nm CPU featuring clock speeds of over 5.5 GHz and power efficiency to make Intel wish they weren't on 10nm. 4 CPUs are launching today: the Ryzen 5 7600X, the Ryzen 7 7700X, the Ryzen 9 7900X, and the Ryzen 9 7950X. The Ryzen 7 7700X is an 8-core, 16-thread CPU priced at $400. It represents the mainstream choice and is probably what most people will end up buying. It's 25% more money than the 7600X, and it has 25% more cores. It clocks a little bit higher, and it is well worth the cost if you can afford it. This is the CPU we are focusing on today. We have an all-new platform today called AM5. This is a new socket for a new series of motherboards for Zen 4 and beyond. A quick overview of AM5 is that it moves exclusively to DDR5 RAM. It includes support for PCI Express 5. It adds 4 more CPU lanes, bringing the total to 28 versus 24 on AM4. Improved USB support, including 20 gigabit per second Type-C ports, and much, much more. A more complete review of AM5 will come once the B650 motherboards launch in October and we have more time to spend with multiple boards. Then we'll be able to provide a proper platform review at that time. Today we'll be testing 4 CPUs from Intel and AMD. First, we have the i7 10700K with 8 cores and 16 threads. Launched in 2020, it is part of the Comet Lake series of CPUs. This is also the last of the Skylake core-based CPUs that date back to 2015. You could swap this out with an i9 9900K here if you like. It's the same performance. You could also substitute an i7 11700K here, and it wouldn't change the results much. Second, we have the Ryzen 7 5800X, also with 8 cores and 16 threads, launched in 2020 for $450. This features Zen 3 cores, which were a solid improvement over Zen 2. Thankfully, the price has dropped quite a bit, now a very reasonable $250, a worthy consideration for a new build today. Third, we have the Intel i7 12700K with 12 cores and 20 threads. Launched in 2021 for $400, this features all new cores with a higher instructions per clock cycle, the first time since 2015 Skylake that we've really seen a per core per clock improvement from Intel worth talking about. This is a hybrid CPU. 8 of the cores are performance, 4 are efficiency, with hyperthreading only on the P cores. That's how we end up at 12 cores, but only 20 threads. Finally, we have the focus of today's video, the Ryzen 7 7700X with 8 cores and 16 threads. It is 4 fewer than the 12700K on both cores and threads. Essentially, it's just missing the 4 E cores. Only testing will tell us if that matters or not. This is also the fastest CPU in terms of clock speed, running 800 MHz faster than the pair of Intel CPUs. We have 4 different test machines being used to benchmark each CPU, as they are all on different sockets. Rather than read out a ton of numbers for the next 5 minutes, we're just putting them all on screen here. Feel free to pause the video to read them if you'd like. The short version is that we have balanced each test machine to be as fair and reasonable to each CPU as possible. First, we'll start off with some non-gaming tests to look at the single-threaded and multi-threaded performance of each CPU. CPU-Z is a very useful program that includes a built-in benchmark. If you don't have it, it's a free download and it takes only a minute to run. Here you can see the results on all 4 CPUs. No surprise that the i7-10700K is the slowest of the bunch in both single-threaded and multi-threaded performance. It is based on a 2015 core design after all. If anything, it's surprising it holds up this well. The Ryzen 7 5800X really shows how well AMD did with Zen 3. They took the lead from Intel and they held it for a year until Alder Lake launched. The 7700X is 16% faster in single-thread performance, and it's 25% faster in multi-thread performance versus the 5800X, a solid generation-over-generation gain that is nice to see. Having said that, the year-old 12700K is 8% faster than the new Zen 4 CPU, which is a little disappointing to see. In multi-threaded performance, there really is no surprise here. 12 cores beats 8 cores, all else being equal. And in this case, they are equal enough. I am aware that some people think that E-cores aren't real cores, but they are real enough to provide 17% higher multi-thread performance over the 7700X. Finally, as an interesting point of comparison, the new 7700X is 36% faster in single-thread and 45% faster in multi-thread than the i7-10700K, a very nice boost to anyone thinking of moving over from Intel. Next up, we have Cinebench R23, which is a 20-minute version of CPU-Z, more or less. The story is similar with one big difference. The i7-12700K no longer wins here. The 7700X is a hair faster by a whole 3%, which is honestly within the margin of testing error. For those of you curious, you can run these benchmarks a dozen times and you'll get slightly different scores each time. I encourage you all to try this. It is rare to repeat the exact same score 3 times in a row, so any result that shows only a 2 or 3% difference is effectively a tie. Next, we have 7-Zip, a file compression program that has a lovely built-in benchmark. Note that if you wish to try this yourself, make sure you're on the same version we're using, 22, because the benchmark does change between versions. The results here speak for themselves. The 7700X beats the 12-core i7-12700K by 8%, probably because 7-Zip is not effectively using the E-cores and because Zen 4's new cache design is that good. 7-Zip is very cache and memory dependent. We often see 10% or more differences in testing just by switching from single rank to dual rank RAM, even at the same speeds. The 7700X is 26% faster than the 5800X Zen 3. This shows the higher performance Zen 4 has holds up in the real world. Next, we have Blender, a great tool for testing 3D rendering performance on both CPUs and GPUs. Again, no surprises here. The i7-7700K is the slowest CPU of the bunch, showing the age of its cores despite the 4.7 GHz all-core clock speed it offers. This time, the 12700K beats the 7700X by 7%. Not nearly as much as you might expect given the 4-core advantage. E-cores are in fact real cores, but they are not P-cores and they cannot be expected to provide the same performance as full cores. Ideally, they are used for background tasks, multitasking, and not for raw multi-threaded workloads. While 7% is nothing to sneeze at, the 7700X is 35% faster than the 5800X here. That is a gain that is noticeable outside of benchmarks. Finally, we have V-Ray, a 3D rendering plugin used by the biggest media companies, in the world. Seen Star Wars Rogue One, Captain America Civil War, V-Ray was used to render the 3D effects in those movies. Here you can see the 7700X and the 12700K are effectively tied again. The E-cores are great for multitasking, but they're not as good at multi-threading, at least not in real workloads. The 7700X is a solid 39% faster than the 5800X, an amazing generation over generation performance gain. AMD should be really proud of that one. The 7700X is a whopping 69% faster than the 10700K, leaving it in the dust. These tests bring up a few points that I want to talk about before we get to the game benchmarks. Multitasking and multi-threading are not the same thing, despite the two terms being sometimes interchanged in casual discussions of CPUs. Multi-threading is when one program will use all the cores and threads you have to run as fast as possible. Some programs, such as V-Ray, will scale to thousands of cores across hundreds of machines in professional environments. Multitasking is when you are running multiple completely different programs that are competing for system resources. A good example would be multiple monitors with a game running on one and a web browser open on another, watching a YouTube video or Twitch live stream. Another would be live streaming your gameplay to YouTube or Twitch. The i7-12700K is a great multitasking CPU, but its multi-threading doesn't appear to hold up outside of synthetic tests. Streaming your games to Twitch would be a good use of such a CPU, as the E-cores could handle OBS, Chrome, and the other background processes, and leave the 8 P-cores to handle your game. Or you could just buy a Ryzen 9 7900X and you don't have to care about any of that. However, that option does cost a little bit more. Before we get into the game tests, an important point to consider. We are testing at 1080p high detail with an RTX 3090 Ti. This is not a normal or typical configuration. It's designed to showcase the CPUs and their true performance differences. However, what you're about to see is generally going to be the best case scenario. Change to 1440p or 4K, increase the detail settings to Ultra, or drop the graphics card down to a 3070 or an RX 6700 XT, and some of these differences will melt away. We will do a follow-up video showing you just that in the future. Our first game is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a very demanding title that shows a surprising result. Even at 1080p, high detail, we are mostly graphics card bottlenecked here. The average frame rates are within a frame or two of each other. It's the 1% lows that show a more interesting result. The i7-10700K has a 1% low of 87, 13% slower than the 7700X. A difference worth noting, but nothing earth-shattering either. The newer 12700K is within the margin of error, so it's a tie there. Next up is Battlefield 2042. This is new to our benchmark suite. Several of you have requested this be added, so here it is. All 4 CPUs can easily run this game. However, that's not what we're really testing here. No one should be asking, can a modern 8-core CPU run Battlefield 2042 at 1080p high detail on an RTX 3090 Ti? Because of course they can. What we're looking for are 2 things: differences in performance and total CPU usage at higher frame rates. Another surprising result is the GPU usage between the newer and older CPUs. The 10700K and the 5800X are unable to keep the 3090 Ti fed with enough data to hold it to 99% usage. However, the 12700K and the 7700X generally are. Average frame rates are pretty close, however. It's the 1% and 0.1% lows that are not, and the lack of CPU power to keep the 3090 Ti busy is part of that. Another point to consider is the 12700K has 20 threads, so each thread being used is 5% of the total, while the other 3 CPUs have 16 threads, so each thread there being used is 6.25% of the total. To put it another way, 50% CPU usage on the 7700X is equal in thread count to 40% usage on the 12700K. Keep that in mind as you look at the CPU usage here. Another point to consider is that the 8-core CPUs are into hyperthreading anytime they exceed 50% CPU usage, while the 12700K doesn't saturate all 12 cores until it reaches 60% usage. Looking at the chart, you can see the averages are all really close. From battle to battle, these can vary by 10%, so while the 7700X is clearly the winner here, it's not by so much as to make a huge difference. The real difference is in the 1% low results. 106 on the 7700X is 25% faster than the 5800X. If you're a competitive Battlefield player, Zen 4 should be a contender for an upgrade. We saw these differences across multiple battles. The actual numbers varied, but the end result was the same. The 12700K and the 7700X were both smoother experience than the older CPUs. Call of Duty is perhaps the most popular online first-person shooter game franchise of all time, and a terribly difficult one to test in live gameplay. We could use replay files, however that really just tests the graphics card as there is no server interaction, no player interaction, and it's just effectively watching a movie at that point. We may well do this for the upcoming graphics card comparisons, 40 series and 7000 series from AMD, but for CPU testing we prefer live gameplay on live servers against real people. The downside is that no two matches are ever the same and you can't directly compare the results, only draw general conclusions. In this case, the weak point is the 5800X, which is noticeably slower than the other three CPUs, even the 10700K. We played multiple matches across several days to verify this performance, and we were never able to match the 10700K's performance. Whatever magic AMD performed in Zen 4, it appears to have addressed this because the 7700X holds its own with the Intel CPUs without complaint. All four CPUs were bottlenecking the 3090 Ti. However, the 12700K came the closest to letting it run at 100%, at least at times. If you're a competitive gamer that demands the very best Call of Duty performance, you might want to wait for the upcoming Alder Lake 13th gen CPUs from Intel or the Zen 4 3D chips due early next year from AMD. Both are likely to be more expensive than what is on offer today, but they will be faster. Cyberpunk 2077, the game with a troubled launch in 2020, has seen a recent resurgence with patch 1.6 coming out in early September. That is the version all these tests were run on. This game is a good example of an unfortunate situation in PC gaming. Some games favor Intel, some favor AMD. This one clearly favors Intel. We ran these tests multiple times, so we are sure of these numbers. The i7 10700K is faster than the 5800X in Cyberpunk, which normally you wouldn't expect because the 5800X really is the faster CPU in general. It is faster in the averages, however it's the 1% lows that really make the difference. 106 versus 82 is a 29% performance difference. The same result carries over on the new CPUs. The 12700K is 44% faster than the 7700X in the 1% low results. It's worth noting that the CPU usage on the 12700K is much higher. It's using all 12 of those cores at times, while the 7700X is struggling to use 8 cores. This may be simply a game optimization issue, however, it probably isn't a Zen 4 issue as the 5800X shows the same problem and it's been out for 2 years. F1 2022 is new to our benchmark suite with the 2020 version finally being retired. Still very easy to run, it's a good test for high frame rates and making sure the 1% lows are solid. Well over 200 frames per second on all 4 CPUs, even the older 10700K has no problem averaging 236 frames per second, easily making this super playable. Of course, that's not why this is here. It's a test of the difference between these CPUs. When we look at the chart, you can see the real winner here. The 7700X is 10% faster than the 12700K and 17% faster than the 5800X. The 1% lows compress these numbers, only the 10700K falls behind a bit. Don't fuss too much over the 0.1% lows. It's really hard to get consistent 0.1% lows in this particular game. Those are all fine numbers in our view. Far Cry 6 is also new to our benchmark suite, finally having retired Far Cry New Dawn. This game does not want or need a dozen or more cores. What it really wants are fast cores, and the results here definitely show that. Look at the graphics card usage. The 10700K and the 5800X both show noticeably lower usage versus the 12700K and the 7700X. All 4 CPUs are bottlenecking the 3090 Ti, however, that is the point of such testing. We are showing you how much faster the newer CPUs really are when given a fast enough graphics card. Set this game to 1440p ultra detail and you'll see these numbers compress as the GPU usage rises and the CPU usage lowers. 157 frames per second average on both of the new CPUs shows just how much this game wants a few really fast cores. 1% lows also reflect this. The difference is noticeable enough to matter in live gameplay. The 7700X is 25% faster than the 5800X, and the 12700K is 40% faster than the 10700K. Guardians of the Galaxy is another new game to our testing suite. Longtime viewers will have noticed by now we really went all out to update our games. The older games were getting long in the tooth. How many people in 2022 really need to see Shadow of the Tomb Raider tested again? Guardians is another game that is CPU bottlenecked on all 4 CPUs. It is also happy to use 8 cores. However, it doesn't seem to care for the E-cores on the Intel CPU as it's only using about 35% there versus 45% on the 8-core chips. The results again speak for themselves. The new CPUs make a real difference when given enough graphics card to work with. 197 frames per second average on the 7700X is 30% faster than the 5800X, while 205 average on the 12700K is 31% faster than the 10700K. The 12700K and the 7700X are somewhat interchangeable here, other than of course the fact that the Intel chip has those 4 extra E-cores for anything else you might want your PC to do while you're gaming. Hitman 3 is yet another new addition to our testing suite, and this one is a whopper of a demanding game. It will use everything you've got to provide fast frame rates and smooth gameplay. It's that smooth gameplay that we'll get to in just a minute. For now, focus on the CPU usage. The 10700K and the 5800X are both really struggling here. Their frame time graphs are going crazy and CPU usage is above 70%, which indicates both are severely overloaded. Even the 7700X and 12700K hit 60% usage at times. This game will absolutely use every bit of a Ryzen 9 or i9 CPU if you have one. As games continue to go in this direction, expect more of this in the years ahead. Looking at the chart, we see the clear and obvious stand out like a sore thumb. The 7700X is fast, but its lack of cores really stands out here. Look at the 1% and 0.1% lows. The 12700K dominates here, being 43% faster than the 7700X. This is why averages can be so deceptive, because the 12700K is only 11% faster than the 7700X. However, in actual gameplay with a powerful enough graphics card, it'll be a much nicer experience. Next, we have Spider-Man Remastered, another new game to our test suite. I feel like I'm saying that for every other game today. What can I say? We really wanted to use some new games to test out these new CPUs properly. Let's look at the 5800X versus the 7700X first. Both are fast and very playable. However, ignore the actual numbers for a second. The 7700X felt smoother, and that's not a metric that fits into a benchmark. It's a difference that only shows up when your hands are on the mouse and keyboard, and this one was dramatic enough to be worth noting. The same thing also happened between the 10700K and the 12700K. Both are well over 100 frames per second average. Both are over 60 frames per second in the 1% low, but that does not reflect the feeling of playing on both CPUs. The new CPUs have a reduced input lag and a buttery smoothness not reflected in the numbers. This game also uses every core you have. However, it doesn't use hyperthreading very much, so we saw 50% usage in general on the 8-core CPUs and 60% usage on the 12700K, which reflects that core usage but not thread usage. We do look forward to testing these on the Ryzen 9 and i9 CPUs. Looking at the chart, you can clearly see how much faster the new CPUs really are. Even in the averages, the 7700X is 28% faster than the 5800X, while the 12700K is 43% faster than the 10700K. This game will use all the CPU and all the GPU that you can throw at it. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, say that 3 times fast, is yet another new game, replacing Borderlands 3 as the follow-up game that should be more demanding. And it is, because we're mostly GPU bottlenecked here. This game will probably matter more for our upcoming graphics card comparisons, however the 1% lows here still tell a story. 187 1% low on the 7700X is 18% faster than 158 1% low on the 5800X. Of course, both are completely and totally playable, even on a 144Hz monitor, but it's the principle of the matter. If the question is the 7700X really 20 to 30% faster than the 5800X, the answer is a resounding yes. Before we go to the 10-game average chart, I want to talk about real-world experience for just a minute. When you use as many CPUs as I do, not just in benchmarking, but in everyday use in both our office and our home, you gain a sense of what each one can do and what to expect. If I were to install Windows 10 on a Ryzen 7 2700X tomorrow, including drivers, Windows updates, and everything else required to get a working functional system, I have a good mental idea of how that experience is going to go. When I installed Windows 11 on the 7700X, I experienced a few wow moments that actually caused me to say, whoa, out loud. More than once I found myself saying, okay, that's the fastest that's ever been before. None of that shows up in a benchmark chart, but it does show up in real-life use. For day-to-day use, opening Chrome, installing drivers, running game updates, the 7700X is one of, if not the fastest CPUs I have ever used in my 37-year history of personal computers. Here is the 10-game average chart showing all 4 CPUs across all 10 games tested. We effectively have a repeat of 2020 with a tie between the 10700K and the 5800X and a tie between the 12700K and the 7700X. Taking into account the 1% and 0.1% lows, the 12700K is 4% faster than the 7700X. However, this is within the margin of testing error, so I'm not declaring either CPU a winner. Rather, they are both very, very fast CPUs, and either would make an awesome gaming experience. The 7700X is 19% faster than the 5800X, falling in the middle of their 13% IPC claim and 29% single-core performance claim, so we can say their marketing claims pre-launch were fair and honest regarding performance. Overall, the Ryzen 7 7700X is an impressive CPU providing premium top-of-the-line gaming experiences on an all-new platform that should have several years of upgrades in front of it. Is it worth buying? That's a harder question to answer because Intel is about to launch Raptor Lake in a few weeks that, in all honesty, is likely to be faster than Zen 4. However, in fairness, Raptor Lake is the end of the line for LGA 1700, the socket they install into. It will be the last generation before Intel moves to yet another all-new socket for 14th Gen Meteor Lake next year. One huge benefit of Zen 4 is the option to upgrade the new CPU in 3 or 4 years without replacing your motherboard, RAM, or having to reinstall Windows. For a lot of people, that is a huge benefit and one that I completely understand. If you haven't seen it, check out my recent Why AM4 is Awesome video. I use a real PC that I built in 2018 and have upgraded many times as an example of what AM4 brought to the table. I'll link it in the video description. The ideal buyer for the 7700X is someone who has a 4 or 6 core CPU and is looking for modern performance with room to grow. Of course, anything old like an FX or a 4-core i5 CPU is an easy example. However, others you might not think about include first-generation Ryzen systems, such as a Ryzen 5 1600 installed on a B550 board. Perhaps you want a new board with new features, more RAM, a larger power supply, larger storage. At that point, you're building a new PC, and it's worth considering the leap to AM5 at that point. Another example would be an i5 8600 or an i5 10400 or even an i7 8700K. all of which would be a WoW upgrade to a 7700X. I would not, however, upgrade an i9 9900K or a Ryzen 7 3700X to a 7700X. Existing 8-core owners should really consider the step up to Ryzen 9. It'll last longer, and it's the premium upgrade option for people who built premium PCs back in the day. Regardless of what you do, I want to point out that we are all winners here. AMD and Intel competing means that we get new and improved CPUs more often, so it really almost doesn't matter which one you buy, because at the end of the day, we have choices, and choices are a beautiful thing. Ewin Racing has a wide selection of chairs to fit all shapes and sizes of gamers, ranging from petite to cuddly. They have something for every type of gamer. Not just sizes, but colors and material options as well, including red, blue, purple, pink, orange, and more, plus cloth and leather choices. We have over half a dozen chair and desk videos in a playlist down in the video description below. We also have a very special offer just for Tech Deals viewers. Save 30% off of everything using discount code TechDeals using our link in the video description. We have used Ewin gaming chairs for 3 years in our office, sitting on them for up to 8-hour marathon live streams. They are very comfortable, and we are happy to work with Ewin to bring you this special discount and recommend Ewin for all of your gaming chair and desk needs. Thank you all so much for watching to the very end of this video. 2 gold stars for all of you still here. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to our channel with the big huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, you know where the comment section is. Links in the video description, they will exist. If you love our content and you want to support us at no extra cost to you, notice the peanut butter? If you use those links, anything you buy after you click on the link, even if it is literally jars of peanut butter, pays us an affiliate commission through the various stores. Amazon, Newegg, eBay, and some others are linked down there. It doesn't cost you anything extra. This is kind of how the web's monetization system works these days, and it is certainly a great way to support us proactively without actually having to spend any money directly. Your support is very much appreciated. You will also find direct support links down below. There's a join button on YouTube, and there's a link to Patreon. Filming scripts and benchmark charts are usually posted early over on Patreon. However, because of the launch embargo I cannot do that this time around, but normally for videos, they do get posted early. $2 a month or $20 flat for the entire year is also a great way to support us, and you get early access to what we're working on behind the scenes. It's also a great way to communicate, ask questions, and provide feedback. Thank you all so very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.